Alright, so in this video what we're going to do is we're going to talk about lighting and rendering setup, and this is going to be something that's universal throughout many of the assignments that we do. Even if it's something that, you know, is kind of like out of the ballpark and, you know, cartoony looking or whatever, we definitely want to focus on setting this stuff up correctly. So what we're going to do is go through each one of these items here so you understand each one correctly and can set up your scene correctly. The first thing we need to do is make sure Maya is closed. Then you're going to copy your preferences into the correct area. Okay, the same way I showed in the first video. Then what we're going to do is go to File and do a project window inside Maya. It's thinking, it's thinking. There we go. Finally. Make a new project. Let's call this, actually not orientation, lighting setup orientation. And as always, include your last name as like the start of this or the end of it, somewhere in there. Make sure your last name is inside here. That way in case someone copies it, they have the same name or the same lighting setup underscore orientation, they don't accidentally overwrite your stuff. And as far as where we're going to save this, I saved it onto my D drive, Sarcona 2520 in my work folder. Okay. And wherever my work folder is, there it is. Alright, so we'll hit accept. And what we're going to do in this is we're just going to work down the line here. Okay, some of these will overlap. We're going to create a scene or several scenes that will include those things, and then these are items you're going to show. Now before we get started, this first item, linear workflow, that's the big one. Okay, that's really one of the things that's really going to help our images come out correctly. A lot of times in computers, the images are not displayed correctly. This is, just look up dog. Okay, this picture of a dog here. Here we go. In order for this to display on my screen correctly, the computer takes basically this image and it applies what's called a lookup table. Okay, basically it adjusts the colors in this original image in order for it to be displayed on my screen so that I can see it correctly. So that workflow, lookup table is one of the things that typically is referred to. You also may have heard color profile, but what it is a way for it to display correctly on the monitor. Okay, now if we take this image and we did some adjustments to it, what's happening is the corrected image is getting adjusted, not the original data. Okay, the original data in this image is essentially gone. It's just adjusted now. Okay, it's like permanently adjusted. So what we try to do is we try to set up what's called the linear workflow. Okay, that's what that means. Trying to set up so that all the math that happens inside of our scene happens correctly. So this is a website called Grayscale Gorilla, and they have some pretty cool stuff. The guy does a lot of cinema and After Effects tutorials in here. But he has this little blob or blurb on what linear workflow is and how it can help you render better. There's some information there. Here's some more information. Essentially, it comes down to this area right here. Computer monitors are lying to you. This means we have to apply a gamma curve to your final image to display it correctly on these screwed up monitors. Okay, so that's essentially what it is. Okay, there's a lot of things that go into making the linear workflow work, and we're going to cover those items so that everything turns out good. All right. Now this is essentially what happens when we have an image. It gets color corrected. Okay. So imagine that these are the colors. Now it should be straight along this center line here, this diagonal line, but it's not. What happens is it has to be adjusted. That's what this curve is. It's that adjustment to the image, to the colors of it. If you think of Photoshop in the curves palette, that's essentially what it's doing. Okay. Now, in order for us to compensate for that, we have to apply an opposite curve, like this. And that opposite curve will line it up, okay? It's confusing. You're not going to get it right away. Just trust me that linear workflow is something we want to set up for every single piece that we do. It's not difficult to set up. It's just a matter of clicking the right buttons and doing the right setups. So, inside Maya, we're going to go to our render settings. And I'm going to go to Enable Color Management. There it is. Okay? So what this means is that anything we bring in is going to have this sRGB color profile assigned to it. Anything we output is going to be linear. So if we jump back to here, if I were to bring in this picture of a dog, it would read that this dog is an sRGB color profile image, and it would correct for it. It would apply this negative gamma to the doggy picture. Okay? And that would mean that the dog picture is now on this linear line. Okay? Now there's some stuff like if you look down here, you know, this data is essentially, it's not very much data right there. It's pretty much flat. So by applying this, we're not going to get a full-blown color correction, but it does a good enough job. Okay? So we're going to enable color management in Maya, sRGB linear. Okay? We're going to render through mental ray for all of our stuff. There might be a specific item we don't render through mental ray, but everything else is going to be, you know, stick to that as your base. Okay? I'm going to go down to image format. We're going to change this to OpenEXR. We're going to change our image compression to RLE. OpenEXR is a format unlike any of these other ones here, but it allows us to save more than just one channel to it. Okay? Like for TIFF, we basically have red, green, blue channels. But for OpenEXR, we can have red, green, blue, plus we could have 100 other channels if we wanted to inside there that kind of helps line up our stuff correctly. Okay, this compression here is just a good one. RLE, you can try these other ones too and see if you get better results, but I've used RLE, that's fine. Okay, we'll set the other stuff up after. So that's fine here. For color or linear workflow, all we have to do is check this guy here, right there. Alright, so I'm going to go to the render view, which is this little blue clapper. And under display, color management, I'm going to go to image color profile and change this to linear. You can see how it brightens up this image. Now this is, if I go to the render settings, whatever button I check here, enable color management, you see that this is the default, sRGB linear. I'm giving it sRGB, I'm outputting linear. sRGB go into the program, linear images come out of it. Now if we wanted to see the image in the render view, we have to tell Maya that we're giving it a linear image to show us, but we need it color corrected so that we can see it. Okay? This way basically all the math gets done right at this linear level. So this is essentially what's happening, is that we have an image that says image that goes into the program. Okay, now without color correction it just comes out as the image. Alright, so that's typically, you know, their previous workflow that you may have had before. Now the way we want to set this up, let me erase that, is that when we take an image, and it might be better if I just type this. There we go. We take an image, we need to first color correct it. Okay, so this is an image that is sRGB'd. Okay, that means a color profile has been applied to it. Okay, so we're going to take this and convert it into a linear image. And I will draw a fancy graphic underneath. That means it got converted into this linear image like that. Okay, so then down here we're going to be outputting a linear image. Alright, so I just skipped ahead and just redrew this, or drew the whole thing so you can see it. So we have an image that's an sRGB. We're converting it to a linear image. We do all the math to it. We get our linear image at the end, and we convert that to an sRGB. Okay? So in order to see this, we have to tell it that. So sRGB linear in the render settings, and then in the color management under the render view, we go to linear sRGB. Okay? That way everything happens in there. Now there are some images that we don't need to color correct. Work. There we go. This image here, which is an HDR, let me open up Nuke. This image is an HDR, and an HDR image already has that. It already has the linear setup inside it, because that's just the kind of image that it is. So if I go into Nuke, there it is, and I drag this in here. Come on. There we go. We take a look at this. Okay, so there it is. It took a second to load. This is a linear image. If I double click it, right here it's reading, this is sRGB. It should be being read as linear. There we go. Okay, so now this is being read as a linear image, and up here it's being displayed as an sRGB. If I display it as none, you can see how dark this image is, and then by applying that sRGB, then we can actually see it. Okay, so that's what's happening inside Maya that we're setting up. So the buttons we've clicked so far is under render settings. We've enabled the color management, left these as default sRGB linear. We changed this to OpenEXR. We changed this to RLE. Then we went to the render view, and then under display color management, we've just set this to linear and sRGB. Okay. So that's essentially, that's our linear workflow as far as clicking the right buttons to turn it on. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a plane. There we go. And I'm going to create a sphere. Make sure it's sitting right on the ground. We could even use our hotkey. Y-stack. There we go. Perfect. And then we're going to create a light. Okay, so this is the linear workflow. This is all part of that same thing. These guys here, not really the Mia shader helps, but the gamma correction is going to be one that we're going to use, and area lights are going to be one that we're going to use as well. Okay, so lights, area light. And area lights are great because they're more representative of what a real world light looks like than most of the other lights. Okay, so I just hit T so I could pull out this extra manipulator that I could then snap holding V to the sphere. Now I can just move this around wherever I need to. Okay, now when I render this, you can see this is crazy blown out right here. And, you know, it doesn't really look very natural. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the light. And in the attribute editor, so we hit Control A, or you can pop open, obviously, your attribute editor there. We're going to tell Maya to use the light shape. And you'll see that just by clicking that one button, we don't have that blown outness anymore. Okay. Also, we're going to set this, high samples to 1. We're also going to scroll up, and where it says decay rate, we're going to turn that to quadratic. Okay, and this is, what a cute dog. This is the decay rate for lighting. Okay, essentially an image with that's cute. I clicked the wrong one. An image with no decay is basically just going to be as strong at the start of this as it is at the end. Okay, linear has this kind of drop off, quadratic has that, and cubic has this. Quadratic is the most realistic lighting. Okay, so we want to use quadratic light off. That way the light doesn't light up all the stuff back here. Now when I hit the render button, we're probably not going to see anything Very little. Okay, we see very little. And then all we have to do now is just start cranking up that intensity, and we'll start to see, obviously, more of this scene. Okay? Now, we might even need to go up to like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. It all depends on how big your scene is. Alright, so this is at 100, and you can see how nice, that looks, and it looks pretty natural. It is grainy because our settings are down. Okay? But that's part of it. Now let's pretend we want to change the color of this light. So I'm going to click the light, and we'll just pick something like, in the blue area. There we go. Okay, now what we're going to find by doing this is that this light color that we chose here is not really representing the light that's coming out of there. Okay? Now with linear workflow, when we take an image that's an sRGB, we convert it to linear, we do the math on it, then we get a linear image and convert it back to sRGB. Okay, that's the process that's happening. But what happens when we have just a flat color? So if I go over here and I just have this color here, that color also needs to be converted into a linear image, okay? Or a linear color space. Now I could go through and just kind of pick a darker color to compensate for, how light this color is coming off, but that's not really going to do what I want it to do. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the map button next to color, and I'm going to go down to utilities, and I'm going to scroll down to gamma correct. Okay. And then what this is going to do is I'm going to type in 0.454 for all three of these, and then I'm going to go back to my value and repick that color. Now, just by doing that, by putting this gamma correct on, let me save this image, we'll render the next one, that should correct that color. Now, it may not be the exact color here, but it should be a lot closer. That's pretty close. Okay, you can definitely see the difference in color between the two. This is much closer to the color I actually picked. Okay, so that's what we're going to have to do, is that anytime we have a flat color, we need to also gamma correct that color as well. Okay, and that gamma correct is just doing that conversion process. Okay, so I don't need it on the light itself. I like to keep the lights for right now white, so I'm just going to right click on the word color, break the connection. Okay, so that's it for that. Alright, so now let's go down to the next area in here, which is the Mia shader. Okay, and the same thing, if we added a color to this Mia shader, we have to add a gamma correction as well. I'm going to go to this, lighting and shading, assign new material, and under mental ray, I'm going to look for Mia material X passes. That's the one I want. So on this, I'm going to just rename this to ball underscore Mia. Okay, and the cool thing about a Mia is that I can go through the presets, and I could default this to whatever I want. Here's Chrome, so I can just replace this with Chrome. And then when I render, this is going to look more like Chrome than it did. Look at that. Just by clicking a button, I have this really cool looking Chrome sphere. Go back to presets, copper, replace. And there's copper. Okay, so you see that we can just jump to the presets, and it's a good spot to start. Okay, I don't like to end there because then everyone's glass is always going to look the same. Everyone's Chrome is going to look the same. It's a good idea to start there, get your bearings, and then you can tweak things as you go. Okay, that's one of the benefits of the Mia shader. The Mia is actually created because it was built for architectural things. If you look here, it's basically like transparent things, translucent things, brushed metals, rubbers, plastics, woods, glass. So it's very, very cool in that aspect. Okay, a lot of the stuff that's in here is somewhat self-explanatory. I'm just going to undo before I assign that thing to it. There we go. Back to the defaults. Is self-explanatory once you understand what these things mean. So diffuse is color. How much of the actual color is coming off of this. So if I go in here and I choose, let's say that blue again, this blue, if I render it, is not going to be that blue. Okay. Remember, we have that gamma correct we're going to have to do. So if you look at that, you'll see that the blue is much lighter. Look at that blue. Look at this blue, much lighter. So I'm going to click on this map button and go down to Utilities and go back to gamma correct. There it is. And again, type in 0.454. Now you imagine you have 100 different materials here that you're playing with, let's say, 100 different colors you're playing with. Every time we have to find the gamma correct, type in those numbers. This next part we're going to get a little bit more efficient, okay? Much closer to that actual color. Much better, okay? So let's right click on the word color and break the connection. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do this the efficient way. We're going to click on the map, and I'm going to find that gamma correct again under Utilities. There it is. Now before I click on it, I'm going to right click and add it to my favorites. Okay, so what that means is that under my favorites, there's gamma correct. So now we can just click on that. Now I'm going to type in the numbers again, and that's the last time I'm going to type those numbers in, because I'm going to go up here to presets and I'm going to save my preset. See, the top says save gamma. So I'm going to save this as 454. That way I know what the value is. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to hit, for mine, I'm just yes, overwrite it, because I already had one there called 454. Alright, so now anytime I go back, if I change these numbers here to just something random, and then I go to my preset, and I say replace, now it's back to 0.454. And then I can choose my color. Okay? Makes it a lot simpler than trying to go through and type it every single time. And we have our color corrected. Wonderful. Okay? So, like I was saying, diffuse is color. So the original color of this image, or of this ball, is this bluish color. How much of that color is actually being shown here? That's what this slider is for. So if I take this off, then none of that color is going to be shown. See, now it's just black. Pull that back up, and now we're back to blue. Okay. Here is roughness, which is just how much, or how that diffuse is being spread out over the surface. Reflection, we have reflectivity. So if I crank this, you can see the reflection here. If I crank this all the way up to 1, we're going to get a pretty reflective surface. Now it's not fully reflective because we're also adding in some of this diffuse on top of the reflection. So it's not like it's a piece of blue chrome. It's just a piece of blue whatever that has that really reflective surface. Okay, so we can tone that down or whatever. This glossiness is going to take whatever reflection is here, and it's going to blur it. So as I pull it up, we'll save this and re-render it. What we should see is now that reflection is not very clear. Here's the before, there's the after. Alright, so you can adjust these settings and go crazy with all the different things that we can do with just some of the basics here of just color and reflectivity. You can really capture a lot of different kinds of surfaces that are out there. There's also some highlight only, metal material. This list in here is pretty lengthy as far as what's in there. The best thing to do is to not memorize it or read page for page, but if you look up Mia Material PDF, this top one here is a PDF that goes through every single thing inside that shader. And just by waiting a minute, there we go, we can skip through some of this stuff until we get to the fancy picture stuff. There we go. And then we can see, here's what reflectivity does. Here's reflectivity at 0. Here it is at 1. Here is transparency at 0. Here's transparency at 1. Okay? So you'll become more experienced at this the further you start playing with some of these things. Okay, here's translucency. Alright, so there's lots of different things that you can play with inside here. For now, we're just going to kind of, talk about the basic fundamental things of it that we play with, and then we're going to move on. The other area that's kind of important is refraction, which is transparency. So as I pull transparency up on this object, you'll see that over here it becomes invisible. Well, if we render it, we're going to see that it is invisible, but now we actually have some refraction happening to this. Okay, and refraction is that distortion of the image behind it. So here is, in photography, some really good examples of refraction. Here's these wine glasses, and the way that the light is hitting through the glass, these colors, you can see how it's distorting what they look like. That's very cool. And then here's some, actually looks like it's even fake. Yeah. Some of those probably are fake. So maybe something like that. You can see the stuff's right there. Okay, so you get the idea that it's distorting that image, and that's what's happening here. We don't have anything really underneath, but we are getting, you know, this. Okay, and there's settings inside here too for how much it's distorting it, which is right here, this index of refraction. If you go back to 1, this is going to be perfectly clear. No refraction, no distortion at all, just straight transparent. Here it is with it, there it is without it. Okay, so again, we'll play with these settings as we go on, but I just want you to be aware that this is a large amount of where you're going to spend your time when you're dealing with textures. We also have bump information as well that we'll be playing with too. Okay, let's get back to this. So there's our linear workflow we've covered, the Mia shader, the gamma correction. Anytime we have any color, even when we're dealing with something like reflection color, we would add that to it. We're dealing with diffuse color, we would add that to it. We're dealing with refraction color, we would add that to it. IBL and physical sky. Okay, so let's talk about physical sky and IBL. Now if we look at this object here, let me put my stuff back on. 1.5, let's say. It's not really going to look very realistic because there's not a whole lot of stuff kind of reflecting into it. Also, in the real world, there's never a single light source that's lighting up an entire thing. Or let's say very rarely there's a single light source. Okay, usually light hits an object and bounces around and does all this other stuff. And that's what gives us our light. So what we can do is this image I have in Nuke, right here, this is called an HDR. Okay, it's a high dynamic range image. And the reason it is called an HDR is because it has more pixel data than a typical image would. If you think of an image in Photoshop that you've dealt with at some point, typically the color range goes from 0 to 1. 0 being black, 1 being white. If I zoom in on an area here where the sun is, and we look at these numbers, here's my red, green, and blue. Okay. As I move my mouse, you can see that it's 0.36, 0.54, 0.73, and as I get into the sun, though, you can see that my colors have actually gone above 1. They're almost at 2. Okay, and right where I'm at the sun, that's the highest. 1.973 is what it looks like the highest is. Okay, some of these will go even higher, into the hundreds even, and how much range they have. And then it's not going to have anything really in the negative areas in this image. But it does typically have some extra image information in there too. Okay, so that's what an HDR is it holds more information, it holds more exposures than just a single picture would. So what we can do is we can light this scene using that image. Okay, so I'm going to create a, I'm going to go to the render settings, under indirect lighting, and choose image-based lighting. And in here I'm going to click the folder. And I have an image. It's right here. So I'm just going to cut that and put it into my source images after I close Nuke. There we go. Okay. Now the way I found that is I just went to Google and I typed in free HDR images and I found this one. I downloaded it and I extracted it. Okay. There's a bunch of other ones too, not just these. So I'm going to go into Maya again, use that image, and I'm going to go back to my render view and render this. And what we're going to see is that we have a little bit more detail in our scene than we did before. Let me zoom closer to that sphere. There we go. And we're definitely getting that refraction is happening on that sky. You can see down here, that's what that is the sky refracting into this. Now we can add even a further touch of this. Okay, just zoom out a touch more. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn something on that will use this background to emit light or emit more light. So under my render settings, I'm going to go to Final Gather. And what this is going to do is it's going to bounce the light of our image into the scene. So all these dark areas back here will be gone. So accuracy is 50, point density is 0.5, and point interpolation is 50. That just means it's going to go a little bit quicker. We'll render it again. And what you can see is now this is looking like a much nicer image just by clicking on a button here and adding an IBL. If you want realistic lighting, typically IBLs are the way that we need to go. Okay. Now it is kind of annoying to have this image out here. I can move it if I grab it and just move it upwards like that. I can get different parts of the image. I can even rotate it if I'm not liking what I'm seeing. But one thing I want to do is I just want to hide that image. I don't want to see the image at all. I want to use it, but I don't want to see it as a background image. Okay. So I'm going to go to my image-based lighting. I'm going to click the little arrow, and then under Render Stats, I'm going to turn off primary visibility. Now what that means is that it's going to do everything that it was doing except have it as a background. There it is. So now we have nothing back here, but we have this. Okay, so I can focus just on this little guy without having to worry about that background being there and being in the way. Okay, now Final Gather does take longer. You can see how much longer this rendering is taking with Final Gather on. There we go. It took 29 seconds for that. I'm also going to just change this to physical glass. And I'm going to duplicate it and make another one right next to it. Just offset it a little bit. Okay, now this guy here, he's going to get a Mia also. So I'm going to go to Assign New Material. Now the same thing we did for the Gamma, I'm going to right click on the Mia and do Add to Favorites. Okay. And this one's going to be Chrome. And this will just give me a good indicator as to, you know, what is the reflections looking like, what is the refractions looking like. Okay, it actually looks like it's a similar image, just flipped because of the amount of refraction. What else I like to do is I'm going to create another sphere. And this one's going to be a bit bigger. I'm going to do my little stack trick. There we go. And then this one's going to get a Mia as well. Now here I can go to just Assign Favorites. I don't need to go to Assign New anymore. Just Assign Favorites and grab that Mia. And I'm going to assign to this one just this matte plastic. There we go. And you'll see that it comes with a color. I'm going to add a gamma to it. Under Maya, here's my gamma correct under my favorites. Go to my preset for 454. And I'm just going to pop this to like a 50% gray. And then I'm just going to take down the amount of reflectivity. Let's put those both at about 0.5. And so what this is going to give me is a good indicator as to different surfaces and how they're going to light. I have something transparent, I have something reflective, and I have something that is just full color, but it has some reflection to it. And I think it's probably a bit too much reflection. Let's take this down to like 0.2, 0.2. And I'm going to take these samples down to 1. On any of these things, when you see the samples, setting it to 1, if you can, right here we can't because that's a refractive object. That will allow us to handle the calculation of that other way, in another spot. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now I get this nice gray orb that I can see the lighting on, see how, you know, just a regular object's going to look. I see my transparency, and I see my reflection here. Okay, so that's good. I like the way that's being set up. We have our HDR image, wonderful. Okay, so now we have this set up. We have our linear workflow, the MIA, the gamma correction, the IBL, and we've also talked a little bit about area lights. All right. So what we want to do is we're going to save this one out. So let's save the scene, IBL setup. Okay. Then we're going to go and make a new scene, or not a new scene, we're going to save as again. And let's call this one Sky Setup. And what we're going to do is go to our render settings, delete that image-based lighting, that gets rid of it all, and we're going to create the sky. Okay. And what the sky does is it creates, we don't see it in this image, you can't see it out here, but it creates a sky. And if we look at the origin, we have this arrows. This is a directional light, and the arrows are pointing the direction that the sun is shining. Okay, so if I'm over here, I want the sun to shine on my objects, I'll just point those arrows at those objects. Doesn't matter where this is. It's a infinite light, so it comes from, you know, from far, far away. So now when I render this, what we're going to see is that we don't have that image in there anymore. We now have a sky. Now you also notice that our image is crazy blown out. This is like unbelievably bright. And your first instinct might be, you know, tone down this light. That's not the issue. The issue is on the camera. So I'm going to go to View, select Camera, Control A to get the attribute editor, and you'll see that our perspective camera now has a couple extra tabs. It didn't have these before. This tab here, if you look, is applying a gamma of 2.2. So here was a color corrected image. Now it's trying to double color correct it, which is lighting it even more. So if I just set that to 1, it won't gamma correct it. Now we'll render it again. And now we have something that is much more natural. Now the downside of the physical sky is that it is pretty boring. It's just like, you know, there's a sky. I think I saved the other one. No, I didn't. But we had a lot more color information inside here that was nicer when we did our other stuff. The cool thing about it is that we can change it. Just by grabbing this and rotating where these lights are at, let's put the lights behind it. You know, we'll make a somewhat dramatic scene having the sun behind our objects. So just by rotating that around, you can see here's the sun, there are my objects. So for some instances, some scenes, you may really want to use this kind of setup. We're doing an exterior scene, and it's not set at anything particular. Yeah, we might want to use the physical sun and sky to light this thing. Okay, you could even animate this. It's a very cool little animation, just having this thing go around, because it actually looks like the sun setting. I'll pretty much flatten it out. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, you can see that definitely looks like something like a sunset. Actually, it is. Look at that. The sun is right there. Okay. So that's the physical sun and sky. That's the only thing you have to check on, is just to make sure that your camera has a gamma of 1 and not 2.2. Okay, so we're back to render settings. We're going to delete this, but first we're going to save it. There we go. And now we're going to reopen the, actually we're not going to reopen. Trying to think too many steps ahead. I'm going to delete the physical sun and sky from here, and then save this as light setup. Okay. That way we can go through the different kinds of lights. So that's our next area. We've covered physical sky, IBL, gamma correction, and so on. Okay, so we have an area light here. Like I said, I like area lights. They're really, really cool. We up the intensity. We add this to quadratic. We go down to mental ray, use the light shape, change this to 1. We can also change the light shape here, which is cool. So we can make it a disk light. And you can see the disk shape in there now. Or we can make it a cylinder. Now we can also make this visible. So if we were doing something like a fluorescent light, there's our disk. Okay, now I could also, stretch this out, shrink it down that way, pull it up this way. There we go. I can take the shape intensity up, so I'll put it to 12. And you'll see that we're getting some refraction of it here. And obviously this is taking longer just because we're adding more features. The more stuff we add, the longer it takes to render. And you can kind of see it here, it's being cut off by this thing. Let's go pull this way, pull that back a bit. I'll even duplicate this light. And we'll see what we get off of that. Because I've duplicated a light, sometimes I have to tone down the intensity of it because it's too bright. You can see right here. But just for our little test, we can see what that looks like. There we go. So in this reflective one, you can definitely see we're getting the reflection of those lights, which is what we'd want. Okay. And I want to keep those on. I just wanted to show you that we can do that. We can also add a custom shape inside here. Right there. And then we would typically you don't use a custom shape. Leave this as rectangle, shape intensity visible. Now if I look at this from the back, you'll see that it's perfectly black. Okay, look at from this side, we'll see that bright white shape. Okay, so just be aware of that. All right. Also, if I shrink this light super duper tiny, get behind these objects, and I render this out, you'll see long shadows. Okay. If I make this really, really big, you'll see that the shadow is now diffuse. It's actually being fanned out and softened because the light is so big and hitting it from different angles. Okay, so you always got to play that game of, what do you want this to look like, and finding the happy medium. Sometimes you want crisp shadows, sometimes you want soft shadows. Sometimes you want long shadows, that's why we're so low. Sometimes we want to shoot it from above, sometimes we want to do like a 3-point light setup, whatever. Okay, so that's area light. I'm also going to show down here under light shader, I'm going to click on this map and I'm going to add what's called a portal light. Mia portal light. And what this allows me to do is more efficiently light some stuff. Sometimes this can actually speed up your workflow. But what I want to use this for is, click the arrow again, I'm going to go to the color multiplier and click on the map here, and I'm going to go to black body. Okay, it's called mib_blackbody. And what this does is it'll color my light for me. And while that's thinking, I'm just going to jump here. There we go. And I'm going to look up the Kelvin scale. And you might remember this from school, but this is essentially lighting temperatures. So right now we're at 6500, which is about here, and we're basically in this white range. Okay, that's what we're getting. Now if I take this 6500 and I push it down to, let's say, the 2000 range, I hit enter, not period, what it's going to do is automatically set up our light to be within that range. Now what help is this? We could have just, typed in the number or the color that we wanted. Well, if we're doing something like a candle light, it might be beneficial just to kind of jump into this setup of 1900 and leave it there. Or if we were to animate this, we could set a key here. We could go up a little bit and set this to be 3500. Okay, and then it'll automatically transition from here to here. All right, so we have colors within this range. If we tried it the other way, we might get some funky results trying to go from one color to another when we animate. Okay, or if you're doing something where you need to get this exact light color, then you have that thing here. Here's an incandescent light, a halogen light, a clear metal halide, sunlight, cloudy sky, blue sky. Okay, so there's lots of different things that will just help get you to that more photorealistic, more realistic result. Okay, now if it's a little too dark, I take this intensity and I make it, let's say, 5. Okay, and you can see already it's making it look like it is kind of outside. It needs other stuff in the scene too, but this is definitely a good start. Okay, so that's the portal light with the black body on there. Now the original light settings, all the stuff up here, this is no longer valid. This doesn't do anything. Okay, so if you set those to 0 and you re-render, you're still going to get the same image you just had, because that black body is now taking over all those settings. Alright, so we can just ignore those things. Alright, so that's our area light. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to drop it onto a new layer and just hide it. And we'll just double click the layer and call it area light. Here we go. So now we'll create another light. This is going to be a point light. And a point light essentially just lights from a single point. That's why they call it a point light. And it goes outward. Okay, so our light's somewhere up here and it's just shining outward. We have similar settings that we had on the area light. Decay, we can always set the decay on these lights. Just so we can see what it's looking like. Okay, so we have decay on there. Under shadows, if we want to soften these shadows, we actually have to go through and take the light radius up. So 10 on the light radius, and then 10 on the rays. And the light radius is how big we're kind of faking the size of that. Just like the area light, we actually scaled it. Well, a point light we can't, so we just fake it by adding more here. That's actually probably too big. Let's set this to 2 for that. And then the shadow rays is just how smooth that is. Okay, so there's our light right there. Now here's a cool thing with point lights, is that if we scroll all the way down, there's this light profile. So I'm going to click on that, and it wants an IES. Click on this. I'm going to load in right here. I downloaded some IESs. Okay, I'm just going to pick on, let's say, this daylight, and then re-render it. Okay, and you'll see, wow, it really got dark all of a sudden. This is what an IES is. Oh, they don't have pictures here. I thought they did. Ies profile. It's basically what the shape of a light looks like. It's a better picture here. Okay, so these are all different IES profiles to get the light to have a different consistency, just like we were talking about with the image-based lighting, where we can adjust it to have more realistic lighting. This guy here, we can do this too. Okay, instead of it just coming from a single point, this makes it a little bit more interesting. We find a different one. Save that and re-render it. Okay, really narrow that one. All right, and then you can just download these. You just type in Google Ies Light Profiles and you can download them. I probably grabbed just a weird batch of these, but they actually have floodlights. I'll download the floodlight and see what we get. All right, so there's that. Then we just extract it. So PLTR1R GBI whatever. There we go. So that definitely looks like a cooler looking light. Now the cool thing about this too is that now that we have this light can actually be rotated. So I can rotate the light. You gotta imagine this red line is what's pointing. That's what's pointing. So I'm just going to go to the back of this and do a rendering. And now it looks like we have more of like a spotlight shining on this. And if I bring it down to the ground, you can see the kind of light distribution we're getting here. Okay, much more interesting than just a flat point light, or even an area light for that matter. Now this is more of an architectural thing. Lighting. So if I look at images in Google, you'll see that there's a lot of architectural pieces that will use this, because it helps them emulate what an architecturally correct light would be. Here's a light inside of a house, how that light would just light up the room. Okay, there's a whole bunch of different images showing off that same thing. All right, there's even IES editors, and it's pretty in depth. Okay, so that's the depth of point lights and color profiles. We talked about the color temp. Our next one is going to be light surface. Let's take this point light. Let's drop it on a new layer. We'll call this IES point. All right. And get my bearings here. There we go. That was the correct orientation. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring back this area light that we had before. And what I want to do is I want to have, let's say, something glowing inside this scene. So I'll make a cube. I want the cube to glow. So I'm going to assign a Mia to it. And I'm just going to give this a matte plastic, or a matte finish. There we go. So we have no reflectivity, just some glossiness. And if I render this out, let's give it a color. Let's give it something really bright. Okay, we'll put a gamma correct on here. Oops, I clear my search field. Change this to 0.454. Let's say we want it to glow that color. Okay, so we render this out. And it definitely looks cool in here. Doesn't really look like it's glowing, though. There's no glow around it. Even if I go in here to this guy, to my area light, find that black body again, and I take my intensity down to, let's say, 2. you'll see that that also got dimmer. Now, it shouldn't really get dimmer. That should stay the same amount because it's just a glow. It's just, you know, a light that's always lit up. Okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to add something special to this guy. So I'm going to call this glow material. There we go. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to advanced. And under here, there's this additional color. And that would actually make it look like it's brighter than the other objects. Like, it's not really using the lighting information. The problem, though, with it is that it's going to wash it out too much. And it's not really going to give me the other stuff that I'd want. Okay, so just like what's white now. Okay, well, I could color it also, but I want to do the next best thing. I'm going to click on this map. And I'm going to go to light surface. It's under mental ray. So MIA light surface. And in here, this is where I can pick the color. I can choose the intensity, the final gather, the reflection. So let's just take the final gather contribution up. And you'll see right now it's using this white, and it's just that final gather is now glowing a bit. If we look at this guy here, you'll see that there's no glow. It's actually glowing purple. You can kind of see the purple here is glowing from this. So I'm going to take the reflection contribution up as well. There we go. So now that's glowing as well. It's not glowing, but it's, you know, showing up white. Now, in order to get this color to match the other one, I could add a new gamma, color it to that same thing. But what happens if I change the original color and I want to come back and I don't want to have to change both of them? So I'm going to go to the hypershade. I'm going to go to my utilities. And my last gamma correct in here, you see this number 5. I'm just going to middle drag that right onto the color. And I'll see that that is that purple that I wanted. So now when I render this, I'll just render the whole scene again. It's going to use that purple as the color, pink as that color that it glows with. You'll even see there's some glow here, there's some stuff happening there. And it might be hard to see in the recording, but there's definitely like a pinkish hue right here. Okay, so that's working. Now here's the cool part is I can tone down that intensity of this. So I take this intensity, let's say all the way off. Save this and re-render it. You'll see that it just cuts everything. But now I could take this up a little bit, let's say 0.25. I can take my final gather up to 5, my reflection up to 5. And what's going to happen with that is that it's going to still be that same color. It's going to have some shading to it, and it's going to be reflective in all of these. Okay, so if I go back to my original Mia, let's say I added some reflection to it. There you go. You can see we definitely have a shape here. It's not just flat coloring. We actually have a shape. By adjusting this thing here, we would just flatten it out. It would just be like one solid pink color. That's all it would be. Okay, so that's the light surface. And it's very important when we do anything that we want to glow in post, even if it's a computer screen or whatever, we want to make sure that we use that light surface. Okay. Alright, so we're the end of the linear workflow in the Mia stuff. Now it comes into rendering our stuff out. Okay, so we're just going to create a little simple scene. And I'm just taking this original sphere and just duplicating it back a few times. So I just duplicated it once using Control D, and I'm using Shift D to duplicate it over and over and over again. I'll even duplicate this little cube. Alright, so now let's render this just to see what it looks like. There you go, it's lovely. Okay, wonderful. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to be able to render out this piece of footage, but we want to be able to tweak stuff afterwards. Okay. Looking at this, what if we wanted to have like a halo around these purple things? That's no big deal. In Photoshop, we could take the single image and put a little halo around it, and we would get, you know, that glow. But we want to have more control over that. If this is a movie, we don't want to have to follow it or animate that glow happening around each of these. Also, what if this reflection is too strong? What if this refraction is too strong as well? What if we want to adjust the coloring here? You know, we want to be able to adjust all this stuff in post as well. I'm also going to just up my black body here. Oops, wrong button. There we go. So I want to adjust some other stuff too. Also, everything's in, you know, complete focus. I want to have some depth of field. Okay, we're not going to be doing every single thing, but I just want to kind of get your feet wet as to what we're going to be doing. So I'm just kind of complicating the scene is all I'm doing here, just so we have a little bit more interest in the scene. There we go. Wonderful. And I think I'll also take the light here and just make this a bit bigger, a bit more on the top. Okay, so we're going to go to our render settings, under passes, and we're going to click on this little create new render pass button. Inside here, we're going to click on things that we want to add to our passes. All right, so just so you can see like a little quick, you know, what are these things? What are different render passes? Essentially, it allows us to take our original image, here's a good one, and break it up into these pieces here. Okay, break it up into these individual pieces that we could use to join back into a final image. Okay. So we're going to add camera depth and camera depth remapped. We're going to add ambient occlusion. Scroll down. I'm holding control key as I add these. Diffuse. Let go of control so you can scroll. So it jumps if you hold control. Let's say reflection, refraction, specular. And we'll also output the UV pass in the world position. And indirect as well, and incandescence. There we go. That should be good. So create and close. Let's click the little link here. Now what this does is this is now linked to my master layer. So anytime I render my master layer, all of these objects automatically are connected to that master layer. So when I render this, it's going to render out the master layer. This final image is going to look the same, but now we'll have this extra kind of hidden features of it. Okay, now it's going to take a little bit longer to render these, but that's fine. We'll let it go. Alright, so now it's done rendering. It took 49 seconds, which isn't horrible. Our quality is still down though, which is fine. We'll deal with that. But now if we go to File, there's this load render passes, and all the stuff that I just rendered is listed right here. So if we go to UV pass, this is the UV pass. So this is essentially what the texture coordinates for each object are, which is kind of neat. I can close this, or I can go back to Maya, or I can go up here to Layer and just choose the next one. So I can go to Ambient Occlusion. There's nothing in here. We'll have to fix that. Here's camera Z depth. It looks like there's nothing in here, but if I take this exposure, there's nothing in there. -10. Surprising. Usually there's something in there. Let's go to this. Nope. Let me go back here. There should be something inside that camera depth. there. That's unusual. Figure that out. Let's go to load render pass. We go to diffuse. This is just the flat coloring information. Okay, so you see this object is diffuse is just this color. This object's diffuse is that color. This object has no diffuse because it's getting all of its color information from refraction. This one is getting most of its color information from reflection. Okay. So if we go here to incandescence, this is going to be our glow. So all the objects that glow right here, these purple blocks, are right there. And if I go to load render pass indirect, this is our final gather. Okay. And if we go here to reflection, we should see all the reflection in our scene. You can see there's a tiny bit here. We summon all these guys, and there's a lot right there. And refraction. And that's the only refraction we have, is just that middle one. Okay. And then finally we have specular and world position. Specular is just going to be the little bright spots. And we don't even have any in this specific scene. And then world position is the X, Y, and Z coordinate of every single thing. Okay, this is really just a super high-res image that shows us every single thing, so we can actually rebuild our object inside Nuke using this pass. Let's close that. Alright, so now let's troubleshoot why some of those didn't work. So I'm going to double-click depth here, and you'll see that my near clipping plane is 0, my far is 1000. I'm going to pick my farthest object, which is right here. Okay. Now under display, heads up, object details, I got this guy, and he tells me how far an object is from the camera. That guy is about 77 units away from the camera. Okay. So if I jump back to my render settings, jump back to depth. 77 might be, or 1000 might be a big stretch. Let's set this to 150. That should be good. Yeah, everything should be good inside there. I've never had an issue where that didn't render. I'm going to set the same thing for depth remapped. I'm going to go to 150. Alright, so let's go to AO. And inside here I have to actually go to features and go to ambient occlusion. Okay, otherwise it doesn't render it. Alright, so now let's take a look and see what this looks like. Okay, let me get back to my original camera angle that I had. I'm just using the left bracket. There we go. And I want to save this, so I can go to View, Bookmarks, and edit it, and just say Render Shot. There we go. So now if I need to get back to it, I go to View, Bookmarks, Render Shot, and I'm back there. Okay, so now I'm just going to marquee a section here. Obviously that's our whole, scene, but I won't have to worry about all this extra stuff here. And then we can preview those samples and then check it out. Alright, just while we're waiting for that to render, this is what the depth channel should look like. It should just be a like a foggy image that shows us where our objects are in the scene. Okay, how far they are from the camera is what that pass should show. Okay, and then our ambient occlusion should look like this, where we have white in these open areas, but black where we have stuff touching, and then gray in between. Alright, so now let's go check it out. Load render passes depth. Alright, let's go to load render pass AO. Alright, the ambient occlusion is okay. I would like it to be a little bit tighter here. The fact that the white is way up here and the black is way down there is just too much ambient occlusion. Okay, so let's go to our render settings. Let's go to Ambient Occlusion under the passes, and I'm going to say use local, and I'm going to change my raise to 1, change my spread to 0.5, change my maximum distance to 5. Now this is just my standard startup settings. Your settings as you go and you're doing stuff depends on the scene. So if a scene is huge, your maximum distance might have to be higher. If it's small, it might have to be really, really low. I'm going to open up Nuke while we're waiting, because that depth channel is really confusing why it's not showing what it should be showing. Okay, so I'm just going to go into my images, temp, and this one is called light setup. So if I wait until it's done rendering, almost done. Another way I can preview this is just by going into Nuke and just dragging this into my node graph. See, it says node graph. Here it is. So now I can just click on this and hit 1 so I can see it. I use Alt right mouse button to move around, Alt middle mouse button to zoom in. And then from up here, I can go through and say, let me see the AO, much better. I like having this touching the ground like this and not going up so high, so that's good. The depth remapped, that's perfect. That's what we should have there. And the depth itself, this being super red, is fine. If I go here, when I start to pull this down, you can see, now I can see that depth. Okay. Now the difference between the depth and the depth remapped is that the depth is these blown out numbers. If you look, come on, down here at the red, you'll see that these go up to 25, 30, whatever, okay, 50 or so. And as we get closer to the camera, it's obviously going to get closer to that number. So what this is doing is it's reading off how far each point is away from the camera. Okay. So what the depth remap does is it says, okay, well, you have this information here. Let's make it into something that you can see. All right. So what happens with this, though, is that sometimes you actually lose information. Now, in this case, it's probably not going to lose information because of the kind of images that we're using. Wrong spot. Image bit depth. Right now, we're using 16-bit images. Okay, so if we look at what a 16-bit image is, not that one. There we go. A 16-bit image has 65,000 different tones per channel. Okay, we have typically 3 channels, so that allows us 281 trillion possible tones. Okay, that's a lot of information. Now, if we render out 32, which is another one that we could do, that would allow us even more information. Okay, so I think all of our passes seem good. The AO looks good. All the other ones look good as well. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to go to our render settings, take the unified sampling up. That's good there. Go to the Common tab, and under Frame Animation Extension, we'll set this to name.number. We're going to set this to start frame 1, end frame 1. We're rendering through perspective. Our 960 by 540 is our render settings. And we're going to go to render, batch render, and then let it go. Okay. I'm going to click this because I'm already rendering something in the background. Alright, I did add one extra thing inside here, which was this big sphere on the outside. I just made sure it covered past what the rest of the scene. That's just for the depth field. So make sure you add that in there. Give it a Mia, you can take the coloring basically off of it. Or not the coloring, but the reflections. So if you just take these down like that, you should be in good shape. Okay. So now we're inside of Nuke, where we're going to do all of our work. So inside the folder where you have your image, there's my image. I can just drag this into that node graph, and there it is. And then to connect it, same thing, we just hit 1. Okay. Now 1 is going to connect this to basically the input of number 1. So if I had another image, the sky setup, and I wanted to see this, I could hit 2, and now I can go here and hit 1, go here and hit 2, or because these are already connected, if I move my mouse up here, I can just switch between 1 and 2 to see the different images. Okay, so I can just delete that. Alt right mouse button is this, panning. Alt left mouse button is also that. Alt middle mouse button is to zoom in and out. Okay, so what we want to do is we need to take this, and I want to leave more room between the viewer and this guy here. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to break out the certain passes. Okay, we don't need to take everything out, but I want to do is take some of these out. So I'm taking this, hitting 1 so I can see it, and then I want to take some of these out so I can play with them. Okay, so AO, I want to take the ambient occlusion out of here and reuse it. So I'm going to hit this and go to shuffle. See a little stacker, go to shuffle. So I'm going to click on this, and I just connect it right in here. There we go. So now it's connected to this. Now I'm not seeing the result until this arrow is connected to that, until it's connected to the viewer, until everything goes to the viewer. Here it's just showing me the result of this. This is showing me the result of this plus the shuffle. Okay. Right now the shuffle is just basically this. Look at this as an extract and not just shuffle. So I'm going to extract the ambient occlusion. There it is, ambient occlusion extracted. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to merge it on top of itself. So this guy here has one called merge, and I'm just going to drag the A arrow to the shuffle, the B arrow to the read. Okay, so if we look at that, see the way the arrows are going. The read's going to the shuffle, and then the shuffle is going to the A of this, and then a read is going to the B of the merge. I want to see what it looks like, so I hit 1 on the merge, and there is the result. Now in order to do this correctly so we can see it, I'm going to change this operation to multiply. Okay, so now what I'm seeing is the result of taking this image and multiplying it on top of that image. Okay, and you can see by me hitting 1 back and forth, you can see the difference. Or me hitting 2 on this one, 1 on that one, and then coming up here with my mouse and just doing 1, 2, 1, 2, I can see the result of that. Okay, so that's cool. Let's leave it. There we go. Now what I want to do is I'm going to click on the merge. I'm going to hit the tab key. Now the tab key allows me to get to any menu item just by typing it in. So I just hit tab, and I'm going to search for Z defocus. So this is the Z blur. And basically I have to tell Maya I want to blur this image. So I can grab this point and put it on what I want in focus, but it has to know, like, what am I, how does it know the distance? Right now it's just a flat image to the program. So under this depth channel, I'm going to go into here and choose cam depth perspective.z. Okay, so that's going to use this channel as its method to read what is blurry and what is not, or what is close and what is far. So I move the focal point, and you'll see that now this object is in focus. Or if I drag it to this cube, that cube is now in focus, and the other stuff is not. Okay, if I change my output from result to focal plane setup, the red stuff is out of focus, the blue stuff is in focus. So as I move this, you can definitely see the change in that. Okay, now I want to have a little bit more room here. It's kind of like too, in focus, out of focus. So I'm going to take this depth of field and just stretch that up, and that'll give me more stuff that's in focus. Then I take this back to result. Okay, now we are getting some weird glow around here, some dotty pixels. So let's take this and take the size down, take the maximum down. There we go. Okay. Now if we wanted to see what this is going to look like with and without it, we could just click on the Z to focus and hit D and D. So it's like, effect is off, effect is on. So it just gives you a good indicator as to how to test for these things. Okay, now I did change some of my stuff. I changed my math to depth. And then I adjusted my focal plane again, adjusted my depth of field. And you can see here I get a much nicer drop off. Okay, so just playing with the settings, sometimes you can get some nice results or nicer results. So there's the Z to focus. Now I want to have this thing glow. Okay, so I'm going to scoot this down, or scoot that up, and I'm going to hit tab again, and I'm going to go to glow. So now everything is going to glow. I don't want everything glowing. What I want is I want to have this little box glow. So I'm going to change my width channel to incandescence red. There we go. And it should be glowing just on that. So if I hit glow and I disable it, you can definitely see, hopefully, that there is glow happening around that object. So I can take the size up or down. I can take the brightness up or down. And that definitely adds a little bit of punch to my scene. Now, one thing that's kind of sucky is the order that I did this in. The Z to focus is being calculated and blurring it, but the glow is happening on the original object that wasn't blurred. So it'd be nice if I could add the glow before the Z to focus. Well, I can. Watch how I do that. I just disconnect all my stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to connect the glow first. And then I come down here and I connect the image into the glow and connect this to the Z to focus. So now we'll watch, and you can see it's going to be a subtle change, but it definitely added a little bit more to it. If I look at the glow beforehand, all this stuff is glowing, and then all this stuff gets fuzzy. Okay, so it's very cool that we can do that kind of thing. Sometimes it's, you know, a matter of, I want to see which one's going to look better. And this is where the power of Nuke is, you know, really awesome. So I can just copy these and click off and paste and connect that in. And then I can say, okay, well, what happens if I swap these? This goes first, and then this. So I'll go 1 here, 2 there. Okay, there's actually, in this case, there's not actually a huge difference. I thought it would make a bigger difference. Maybe it is. It's still thinking. See, that means it's thinking. There we go. No, it's not a huge difference. Sometimes it's going to be a bit of a bigger difference. But in this case, it's not. There we go. Okay. So we have our ambient occlusion, we have our glow, and we have our Z defocus. Okay, then to get this stuff out of here, we can just hit tab, and then we're going to add a write node. Okay, if you noticed up here, this first one we brought in was a read node. Now this is a write node. Okay, I'm also going to make sure my read node, you'll notice that it came in as a linear image. Now it's important because if it came in as an sRGB, you see how everything gets super dark because it's double color correcting it. So we'll make it linear. That's what it should be. But then when we output it here, we're going to make sure that this is set to the sRGB color space. So where are we going to save this? We'll click on File. I'm going to put it on the D drive, 2520, work, images, final rendering dot pound dot TIF. Okay, so what this is going to do is going to render out my image, and then however many frames I have, that's what the pounds are for, and .tiff. Okay, and when I type in .tiff, it automatically picks TIFF from here. Then I hit render. Okay, and there it is. So now I can so we can see it, I just click in here and hit R for read, and there's my final rendering. So there we go. So there's what the final image looks like. If we look at this and we look at that, you can definitely see a huge difference between the two different images that we have set up. Okay, and there's more stuff that we can do to this as well. All right, so as far as what you're going to be turning in with this one, you're going to be showing me your scene file here with your two different light setups. Okay, inside that scene, I should be able to see the linear workflow, the Mia, the gamma correction, the IBL, the physical sky. We'll have to switch to the other file for the physical sky. Area lights, point lights, Ies profile, the color temp, the light surfaces, and the render passes set up, and the render layers, which is just that guy defaulted. Okay. And then for your nuke part, you're just going to show me your nuke file that has this setup right here, showing me going from read all the way to the end of writing this out. Okay, that's the assignment. That's that part of it. As a bonus, let's go here and close the properties. Let me show you a couple other things we can do. I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. See, it's cool. I can do one little workflow here, do some stuff to it, and then come over here and work on some other stuff. Super powerful once you understand the foundational bits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go point to 3D. Okay, so what this is going to do, click the right one, let me make sure. There you go, I did click the wrong one. I wanted this points to position one. There you go, didn't sound right. Alright, so what this points to position one is going to do is if I look inside the scene and I hit 1, it takes me into this 3D view, which is, you know, kind of like Maya's 3D view. I'm going to tell it the surface points are the world position, and the surface normal is, let's see, UV pass, I think. There we go. And if you look at this now, I've rebuilt my entire scene in 3D. Now, it doesn't look like my scene, but if I have my camera lined up perfectly, you'll be able to see that's the same camera shot that's in there. Okay? But if I needed to, I mean, look at this. I could actually take this and slip an object right behind this and have something else happen right there. Just for fun. So let me change this to UV pass and world. Yeah, that's what it did. That's what I was assuming that's right. Okay, UV pass, world pass, UV pass. Okay, so it's very cool that I can rebuild this and do stuff to it. I can actually add a light. And I could tint this light. There it is, color. There we go. Okay, now imagine you have a full scene you just rendered out. It took, 6 hours to render, and you needed to change the coloring of it a little bit. Well, look at that. And it's actually reading the information. It's not just like coloring it, it's actually reading the 3D information. Okay, super powerful, super awesome stuff. When we used our shuffle over here to just pull this ambient occlusion out, we can actually pull out everything. It's a little script that I wrote that pulls out. Here is my reflection. Here's the ambient occlusion. Here is the depth. Here's my refraction. Here's the depth remapped. And then we can combine these all back together in order to create that final image or recreate that final image. Okay. We can actually do texturing inside here too. Nuke is super powerful. All right. The assignment is just this little guy, but I just want you to be aware, kind of show you a little bit into what we could do with it. All right, so make sure you save your work. Nuke comp lighting rendering. Okay, so in the next video we'll go through and do this other part, which is creating the wood, plastic, metal, glass, rubber, and concrete. All right, so that's that.